Okay, that's recording started. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Integration Joint Board. I rule that under Standing Orders 5.6 and 5.81, this meeting is being held by remote participation due to the current restrictions and the impact on public attendance at meetings of the IJB. Whilst the public are excluded from attendance at this meeting under the terms of the Coronavirus Act 2020, members of the local media are in attendance via remote link. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be published online for public access after the meeting. Can all participants online please switch off their cameras and mute microphones when not speaking? If you need to speak on any point, please use the raise hand function in Teams or indicate your wish to speak by signalling on your camera or taking your microphone off mute. Officers are reminded to follow the protocols that have been separately issued with regard to their participation. And before we start the meeting, could I please ask the committee officer, I think it's Liesl, to do a roll call for members to indicate they are present.
Thank you. Mrs. Cornick?
Here.
Mr. Fraser?
Good afternoon.
Ms. Haswell?
Hello.
Mr. MacDonald?
Present.
Mr. McGregor?
Present.
Mr. Manson?
You mean Miss Shona here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And would you like me to go through the non-voting members?
Yeah, that's fine. You can do that if you'd like to, Liesl.
Okay, Mr. Chittick?
Present.
Mr. Williamson? Mr. Williamson?
Present.
I have apologies from Ms. Morgan, but I believe Mr. McDonnell is standing in.
Yes, here.
Ms. Watson?
But I need to leave at 3.
Thank you. Mr. Sandilands? No. Ms. Gens?
Present.
I see Ms. Hand is here. Is that in place of Mrs. Hewson?
That's correct, yes.
And Mr. Guyan?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other apologies, Liesl?
No, it was just Ms. Morgan and Mrs. Hewson.
Okay, thank you very much. And members, does anybody have any declarations of interest they would like to make? If any arise through the meeting, please just let me know. Okay, we'll move on to item 1 on the agenda, which is directions to Shetland Islands Council and NHS Shetland. And Joe Robinson, I believe you're going to present on that.
Thank you, Chair. Brian Chittick is actually going to present, so I'll pass over to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the follow-up of the remaining sets of directions, and prior to doing the last set, we just set the scene of what directions are for, and it's the mechanism the IJB uses to action the strategic commissioning plan. And it takes this mechanism as a form of binding directions from the IJB to one or both of the health board or local authority. It is simply put, it is the means by way the IJB tells the health board and local authority what is to be delivered using the integrated budget, and for the IJB to improve the quality and sustainability of care as outlined in its own strategic commissioning plan. Directions are binding and they come at the end point of the process of planning and decision making. It clarifies the responsibilities and requirements between partners, that is between IJB, the local authority and the health board, and are seen as an important way of providing governance around the responsibilities, and that they're made clear and evident. Directions will be communicated to the health board and the local authority on completion and approval by IJB today. And the main primary purpose is to set a clear framework for the operational delivery the functions that have been delegated to the IJB. I think, Chair, what we'll do is we'll ask the individual service leads to present on their directions as we did before, and then take the directions as we go along, if that's okay with the Chair.
Yep, that's fine.
And Chair, just to say, I know that Kathleen Carolan, who's presenting the set-aside directions, has got some meetings this afternoon, so would it be possible to take the set-aside directions for acute first?
Yeah, that's okay. Jane, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to come in on that point?
Thank you. Yes, it's just a point about the report where it talks about the budgets, and then later on we have the revised budget. So the directions today have the budgets agreed in May. I was just checking that that was okay.
Brian?
Yes, I think that'll be fine. The process has been elongated because of COVID. So I think it will just reflect where we are today as the directions are presented, if that's okay, Jane. Okay, it's just to clarify that, because the later paper does talk about specific areas where budgets have been altered. So it's just to clarify that what we're agreeing to, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I think that's a really important point. So did you say Kathleen Carolan was going to present first, Brian?
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead, Kathleen?
Thank you. So the direction set aside includes the following services which are commissioned by the IJB, but they're delivered through the Acute and Specialist Services Directorate. So they include the emergency department at the Gilbert Bain, all acute medical care, which also includes older people and children, renal services, sexual health, and the rape and sexual assault pathways that are delivered by NHS Shetland. So what I've tried to do in the direction is to provide some specific details about the areas of redesign and how we're investing in those. So renal services have seen quite a significant increase in patient requirements for dialysis locally, and that's linked to demographic changes, long-term conditions, which we talked about at the last IJB under some of the other directions. We've made significant investment in our renal department last year, which meant we created an isolation bed, and we also increased the space for dialysis to take place. Next year, in 2021, we'll also be undertaking quite a significant equipment replacement programme. And this year we've focused on succession planning for the nursing workforce in particular. So we've undertaken a programme of active recruitment. We've been quite successful, and we have recruited some new nurses into that team. But one of the things that we have highlighted in the programme of work for renal is how we make sure that we've got a very clear workforce plan and that we've got specific training needs analysis undertaken for that nursing team. In respect of other areas of redesign, we've also got a focus on emergency care. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to look at how we can reduce unnecessary emergency attendances at all of our services, but particularly the emergency department. So we've described here some tests of change that we're doing to put a new service in place called same-day emergency care. And there's a paper on the IJB agenda today that gives a lot more detail about the test of change and its impact. We've also done some work this year, which is ongoing, to look at how we can deliver rape and sexual assault care in Shetland in a sustainable way. Quite a lot of the support that's required for people who require those services is coming from other health boards. So we're looking at how we can develop new practitioner roles, which mean that with some joint working with NHS Grampian, we'll be able to deliver more of that care with practitioners who are based in Shetland. And finally, there's a big piece of work that focuses on the medical workforce. So by that I mean all junior doctors and all consultant posts, but specifically for this direction I'm referring to the consultant physicians who are part of our acute medical workforce and team. So well, I suppose very similarly to other parts of Scotland and the UK, we have found challenges in filling our posts. And across Scotland as a whole, over 60% of posts are vacant. We found that over the last year or so, we've also had significant gaps in our consultant team. And what we've been doing this year is looking at how we can create new models, new contracts for consultants so that they can work in Shetland, but also pursue their own special interests in other trusts and health boards up and down the UK. And we've also been working with other global health providers to see if we can develop collaborative posts where people who've got an interest in working overseas perhaps would also come to Shetland. We've been quite successful in those pieces of work, and we've managed to recruit 2 new doctors, one of whom is a geriatrician. So that doctor will be working not only in terms of acute medical care, but also supporting older people's care in the hospital and in the community setting. One of our objectives around the medical workforce, which you'll see highlighted in the financial paper, is about how we can do more of that recruitment using some of these more innovative contracts next year. And we intend to put out an advert again in the new year to see if we can attract more doctors on these new contracts. So at the moment, it's still very much a test of change because we've only got 1 doctor who's working in that way. But we're hoping that we'll be successful going forward and we'll be able to fill some more of our vacancies using that approach. I think they're the key things that I wanted to say, I suppose, in respect of the direction, and obviously happy to answer additional questions.
Thanks very much, Kathleen. Brian, I wasn't sure, do you want to take questions on each individual one, or do you want to do questions at the end?
I think we'll just take them as we go along, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, any questions, members? Not. Oh, Shona?
Hi, yeah. I just wanted to say I think this kind of approach to getting doctors on island in that kind of more creative and innovative way is great. So I'm assuming does that work out cheaper than what we've kind of been burdened with recently? Is that whole locum thing?
Kathleen, would you want to comment on that?
Yes, having contracts like this certainly has a cost avoidance component to it. There is investment required, there's no doubt about that, but we're not expecting to have the same kind of overspends in 2021-22 if we recruit more doctors using this approach. We have quite successfully tested this model with the obstetric gynecology posts. So we've got 4 doctors working in that team on rotation. So the model does work. It's a question of can we increase the number of people who want to work like that in Shetland, and then build that as our sort of extant model, if you like, rather than the approaches that we've had in the past.
Yeah, I think it is a very new way of working, but I think it's the new way of working potentially, where people are much more kind of flexible, willing to kind of go to different places, and it's such a good way of maintaining their skills elsewhere while us gaining the skills here. So yeah, well done.
Thank you, Shona. John, you have us up next.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Caroline. Question is relating to this and how we acquire services of a clinical nature. Traditionally, Shetland has had close working relationships through service level agreements with Grampian Health Board and Highlands Health Board, for example. What are we doing in order to broaden the net to liaise with other mainland-based health boards to acquire services via service level agreements, and also to broaden the net to basically communicate to the wider clinical population that these options are available to them. If they don't know about it, we cannot talk to them about it.
Thank you, John. Kathleen, do you want to come back in?
Thank you. They're two slightly different issues in that we're not really seeking to move outside of the shared care pathways that we have with Grampian, or certainly in the north, because there are considerable issues in respect of governance. So working with Grampian is a good option because it means that we have continuity of care for our patients moving to Grampian and then back to us. It also means that we've got a specific specialist board to work with in respect to providing additional things like training and clinical supervision. So in terms of us widening our net, if you like, and developing other clinical pathways with other boards, we're not really seeking to do that because it creates a whole host of issues. It also creates issues around transport links for our patients. But we are working very closely at a national level in respect to some of these recruitment issues that you describe. So one of the things that we're doing is putting out adverts in conjunction with other partners like academic partners or organisations that work overseas. And that's really helping to put more of a spotlight on our posts and people being able to see them amongst all of the other jobs that are available. I think a lot of our success is also based on word of mouth. So the clinicians that are coming to work in Shetland are talking to their colleagues in their network and making sure that they're aware of job opportunities here. And that seems to be a very successful way of introducing people to working in Shetland.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Jonathan?
Yes, please. Yeah. Thank you very much for the response, and I take significant comfort from the second element of the answer with regard to making contact with the wider clinical community. I'm still a little bit unsure with regard to liaison with other health boards within the NHS Scotland network. I understand that you need to build the relationships and you need to build up a solid governance procedures. That makes absolute perfect sense. But what are the barriers to engaging with larger health boards such as Greater Glasgow or Lothian? And also, I'd ask Ms. Caroline what she perceives to be the access issues with regard to patients. A flight to Glasgow doesn't take much longer than a flight to Aberdeen.
Do you want to come back in, Kathleen?
Thanks. I suppose I'm just reiterating some of the points that I've made earlier, really, in that we do work nationally and regionally where there are services that require that. I think in terms of our sort of core service provision for specialist care, then NHS Grampian provides a good service for us in terms of specialist service delivery. And I take the point that you can get a plane anywhere, but it's really about continuity of care. So it's much easier for us to have clear shared care pathways with a specific board rather than Shetland residents going all over the country. That creates complexity for them, and we wouldn't want our patients to potentially lose out, or there be patient safety issues because we're splitting up our pre-agreed ways of working. So I suppose unless there's a particular area of service where we'd be thoughtful about looking elsewhere, our is to work with NHS Grampian so that we can deliver a service in partnership rather than having individual patients who are accessing services across the whole country.
No, that makes perfect sense. Sorry, Emma, is it okay to come back? Yeah. Thank you very much, Ms. Caroline, and that makes good sense as well, and I appreciate that. Just and if the quality of service delivery with the patient at the centre of everything that is done is being provided by Grampian, then I take comfort from that. It's just that I also take comfort that you will also just not rule out engaging with the wider NHS Scotland network, and I trust that if and when need whatever to arise, then you would engage in accordingly, whether it be Grampian, Highland, Lothian, wherever. And thank you for your response.
Thank you very much. Do we have any further questions on this topic? Jane?
It's not a question, it's just a comment which has been made in the information at the end of this direction, and just to stress the importance of the strategy reviews that are currently going on, and encourage everybody to have their views heard at workshops, etc. So it's just a comment rather than a question. Thank you.
Thank you. Is your hand back up, Sean, or is it just up from before?
Sorry, no, it's just up from before.
That's fine. Okay, that's fine. Are we happy to move on, or Brian, did you want to make the decision based on each one?
I think, Chair, the way we did it last time is we just made the decision and approved just as we went through each direction, because there were some that were approved with some changes and some that had some comments to put onto them. So I think that'll be easier if we do that as we go along, if you're happy with that, Chair.
Yeah, that's what I thought we did, but I couldn't 100% remember. I suppose my only comments on this were that would we be able to be kept informed of any developments as things progress? So as some of these strands kind of come together, I'd appreciate it if we could get up, even just briefings about where we're at would be helpful. There's a lot of the budget breakdowns that are to be determined, and we don't have the detail on that. So if we could be kept updated that is all going to plan, I would appreciate it. But other than that, I am happy to approve this. Yeah, is anybody else happy to do so?
Yeah.
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Jane. I'm not seeing anybody say anything else, so. Okay, Brian, which one are we going to take next?
Thanks, Chair. It'd be Allied Health Professionals, and it's Jane Pembroke.
Okay, Jane, if you'd just like to go ahead.
Thank you. As you know, that this is a return visit, and I thought it just might be useful if I started off just with a little bit more of an introduction about the AHPs and what we were trying to achieve with our directions. I think collectively it'd be fair to say that the AHPs are very much focused on improving the patient experience, but I think the other part of our directions is also about the staff, keeping the staff engaged and forward thinking. That, you know, there's opportunity to value innovation and also to develop these skill levels. But in as much as we can do that, then that's actually what keeps people within the workforce and keeps also a high level of engagement. The AHPs are doing well, as you'll see in the performance reports, but would never sort of sit on their laurels. You know, we're constantly seeking opportunities, you know, for a higher quality service. What Kathleen was talking about in terms equally applicable to AHPs. They're you know, difficult to recruit to the island. Just going back to our actual directions document, one of the aspects I just want to talk a little bit about was the modernisation, which, as was pointed out, is very similar to all the AHP professions. And that's simply because they're relevant to all the AHP professions, and we left them as we did because what we want to do is report on all of those directions individually. We want to show the progress that every service is making, provide opportunity to share that learning with one another, but also it's an opportunity to demonstrate to the IJB innovation and that sort of thing. There's also some areas that we had some questions about in terms of one of the directions that we have. It's around the development of within occupational therapy services to actually look at the need for an occupational therapist providing a mental health service within the community. This is very much a piece of work that would need building into some sort of business case. We're very heartened by the success of the physiotherapist within the primary health sector, and we're really begin to look at the data and beginning to consider, is that actually where the role for the occupational therapist lies? Someone who can work across both mental health and also physical conditions, so that it's actually a rolled up service, that you don't see two separate people for those sorts of things. The other thing that we're really hopeful of doing too is that there's lots of opportunities that present that we may not have actually known that they were going to be possible when we wrote the directions. One of the things that Kathleen actually spoke about was around the emergency, the same day emergency department service. Again, we're very hopeful of actually being able to work with GBH, with the medical teams there, to develop maybe a role and a presence in there, but also to work with the acute teams to develop some sort of discharge to assess program for people who actually can continue to be treated, but also have opportunity to do well around a reablement program at home. So these are some of the things that you're already beginning to. The directions program, and then you see all these new opportunities, but that's just the nature of ongoing quality improvement and innovation. So I hope that just gives a wee bit of a background as to where we are at the moment.
Thank you very much. Jane, sorry, were you finished?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, any questions on this paper? Natasha.
Hello, Jane. Thank you very much for that. I think that allied health professions have a very strong history of innovation and redesign, and I really do welcome these directions. I'm very broadly in agreement with the directions. I just have one slight sticky issue for me, and I think it may be just around the wording. And that's with regards to the occupational health therapy and the role in the mental health service. I noticed that part is dependent on a business case being approved, and so I find it difficult to prove the direction for that until we have the business case. So I just wondered if either there's a if we can maybe tweak the wording around that so that we can have the business case come to us again, but I don't think that we can really approve to move forward with that until we have the source of funding nailed down.
Thanks very much, Natasha. I see Joe has a hand up, so if you'd like to come in on that, Joe, that would be good.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just in terms of clarification, I checked over this wording, and what it says is the direction is to continue to work with the Health and Social Care partnership to assess the need for the mental health OT input, and then the cost and source of funding to be developed through a business case. So this direction is asking you to approve the work being done in order to inform a business case that will come back to the IJB. So I think we probably could have been a bit clearer about that. And what we would be looking at is, as Jane had said, taking the evidence that's starting to come from the physiotherapist post in primary care, that seems to be early indication is indicating that it will be very successful, and that we won't necessarily need to recruit backfill to other posts. We would say that the direction is asking you to approve that we do that work in order to come back with a business case, rather than necessarily approving the recruitment of an occupational therapist at the moment.
Natasha, did you want to come back in at all?
Just to quickly clarify, so the work that requires to be done, the work can be done within the current funding that we have allocated. Okay. No, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for that, Jill. Shauna?
Hi, just to say I really am happy with that kind of approach, and thanks for clarifying how that's going to work within the current directions. But I think that taking that approach to have some kind of mental health support within a service, rather than that kind of more, we know we've got more generic mental health service, but I just think that's a really innovative and probably quite positive way to go.
Thank you. Any further questions? Natasha, is your hand back up, or are you just... That's fine, sorry. Do we have any further questions for Jane? Are we happy to approve the directions for allied health professions? Yeah. Seeing nobody say no, so I'm going to take that as a yes. Jane, did you want to come in?
No, it was just to say yes, I agree, and that the electronic notes and files comes under the same discussion with Joe about, and we're just agreeing to that being continually advocated. But I do think that is a key part of these directions, so we can revisit that and keep that up there as a progress on that back to the IJB, because I see that as key. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Jane. Okay, are we happy to move on to the next one? Brian, do you want to say who's next?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's mental health, and it'll be Karen Smith.
That's fine. I wasn't sure. I was just checking it was in that order. Lisa, did you?
Can I just confirm that you have approved the last direction?
Yeah. Did you need them to be?
I'm happy for you just to acknowledge it's unanimously approved, but it's just for my record rather than moving on.
Yeah, no, I think they were unanimously approved, both of them.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, Karen, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. So the direction for adult mental health services, just to kind of give you a bit of an overview of the purpose of adult mental health. It's we enable individuals to recover to whatever their own potential will be. Some individuals will never fully recover, but what we aim to do is help them to live as independently as possible. There are 5 sections within adult mental health that are delivered on island within Shetland. So there's adult psychiatry, which involves psychiatrists and psychiatric nurses. There's psychology, which is a range between clinical psychologists and therapists. Then we have a substance use service that is delivered with medical input, nursing staff, recovery workers. We have a dementia assessment service that's nurse-led, and a community mental health support service that is social care. And then I've listed a number of the off-island specialisms. So similar to the acute sector, a lot of the specialisms are delivered via NHS Grampian or north of Scotland in a regional capacity. I wanted to highlight a number of the improvements that we'll be leading on over this coming year, and I'm happy to take questions about any of the other ones, but wanted to kind of highlight the nurse-led out of hours service. So we've had nurses on call throughout the COVID period. What we're doing from the 1st of December is that nurses will be the first on call. So throughout the COVID period, it was the psychiatrist was first on call and a nurse was available, but we're going to flip that round. So it will be nurses that will be first on call. Similar to the urgent care directions, we'll look to recruit to the vacant posts and use a similar model with the vacant consultant psychiatrist post. We've been given an opportunity to develop some perinatal services locally, but also how we're linking with the Grampian service and the regional service. And then a number of kind of operational issues where we're looking at pathways for specific conditions. We've substance use national standards that we'll be implementing over the coming year. where there's the psychological therapies improvement plan around how we improve the waiting times, which currently stand at, obviously, as you know, a long waiting time. Happy to take any questions from anybody.
Thank you very much, Karen. Okay, I'll open it up to questions. Does anybody have any questions? Jane.
Thank you, Karen, and it's some really excellent improvements there. I'm delighted to see that having the perinatal CPNs allocated to the perinatal project is moving forward, and I see what budget is for there. Can I just clarify the one below that, the improved recovery outcomes for service users, just the waiting times? Can I just clarify SMRS to meet 3-week waiting time target? Is that from waiting time from referral or waiting time from assessment? That's just my question.
Referral.
From
90% of individuals will be seen within 3 weeks from referral.
So, and so that's significantly larger, isn't it? Quicker.
Oh yes, yeah. It was a heat target for a number of years, and now it's a heat standard, and we meet that with the odd occasional individual who is needing a very specialist service, and so we might miss for the odd individual to meet the 3-week target.
Thank you very much. That just clarifies that for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. John?
Thanks again, Emma. Hi, Mr. Smith. Thank you very much for coming. It's great to hear with regard to the innovative approach with the first point of contact being CPNs and out of our service. Can you let the board know, please, in the event of an out of hours mental health crisis, is Shetland suitably equipped with an appropriate place of safety? And also, are the other services, primarily Police Scotland, suitably trained in order to deal with people that are presenting with a mental health crisis?
Is that okay if I answer that, Chair?
Yeah, please go ahead, Dan.
So we do have a designated place of safety, which is the Gilbert Bain Hospital, and depending on what the presentation is, we will manage that with staff from the Gilbert Bain Hospital and with staff from the mental health team. So sometimes we bring in additional psychiatric nurses in order to be able to manage someone until we're able to transfer them to Aberdeen if that's the pathway that they're needing to follow. Difficult one to answer around Police Scotland. There is a training programme that is being implemented. They have a mental health designated police officer who I speak with regularly, who's for the north of Scotland. So she's based in Inverness. So it's kind of her responsibility to work alongside the police. We have, for certain individuals within the service, we have professional meetings where we involve the police and we involve the ambulance service and we involve all of the individual professionals who were involved in this individual's life, and we agree a care plan and how each individual service will respond to that individual, because you can't kind of do a blanket approach for everybody because different people respond differently. So we involve the police in all of our professionals meetings so that they will receive and respond to that individual in the same way that we receive and respond to them. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. And I suppose that that is that there's an element of an unknown quantity with regard to to give comfort that suitable training is in place with Police Scotland. I can look into that away from here. If you could clarify for me, please, Mrs. Smith. You say about the Gilbert Bain Hospital being the designated place of safety, which is entirely appropriate. Are you confident that there is suitable space within the existing Gilbert Bain Hospital setup to receive the type of care that they may present with when they're required in a place of safety?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of different places that we would be asking for people. So some people will present at A&E and they will be seen in A&E and then they'll be discharged from A&E, because it's difficult to kind of, again, to put a blanket approach. It depends what people are presenting with. We have access to the general wards, usually Ward 3, and they're incredibly accepting and excellent when we're working alongside someone who's got mental health or a mental illness, or is having a psychotic episode. It's an incredibly difficult thing to work with. We also have a low stimulus room that we are able to use if it's appropriate. So the psychiatrist will make the decision on whether that's an appropriate use of that space, and it's a low stimulus room in order to keep people quiet, understimulated and safe. But again, it depends on what the presentation is. It's not always an appropriate space to use. It's the ward would be an appropriate space. If someone is medically compromised, they need to be somewhere where they've got access to general nursing as well as psychiatric nursing. So we make a decision based on each individual, but the answer is yes, that I do think the Gilbert Bain provides us a place of safety for as long as it needs to. And then we need to either have people back at home with being cared for at home, or they need to go to a specialist inpatient unit, because we're not an inpatient unit.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Kathleen, did you want to come in on that point?
Thank you. It was just very briefly to add to Karen's response, which I completely support, is that one of the reasons that we've put in place the same day emergency care unit is so that we can reduce overcrowding in the accident and emergency department, particularly for patients who might be presenting with acute mental health crisis and for children. So that's one of the other reasons that we've put that in place, is that we see that it particularly adds value for people who might present with mental health distress.
Thank you. I think that was really helpful to come in there, Kathleen. Jim?
Page 54, where it's going on about individuals receive appropriate joined up care packages. In one column we mention the third sector, but when it comes up joined up working between CMHT and Spray, there's no mention of third sector. Which is the actual job. So I thought that you would liaise with the third sector in respect to the patients, and that should be in that column as well. I don't know what you think, Karen.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to add that in. That was a kind of specific piece of work, Jim, that we've been working on around so the Community Mental Health Support Service, which is our social care element of the service, and our CMHT, Community Mental Health Team, which is the NHS side, have different paperwork, but we have the same individual. So it's around how do we get that paperwork to be the same? How do we get that joined up? We absolutely work alongside the voluntary sector, and we often include them as part of our care plan. So apologies if it didn't come across properly. We absolutely work particularly alongside Mind Your Head. So I can absolutely add that in. It's an omission that shouldn't be there. It was more that specific piece of work for social care and NHS need to have joined up paperwork.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it, any further, John?
Thank you for letting me come back in, Emma. It was just an afterthought on the response that I received from Kathleen and Karen. Would you be of a mind, Emma, as chair of the IJB, to write to the area commander to get their thoughts on what mental health training is in place for the police officers in Shetland, please?
I can take that off the table. Me and Brian can have a look at that if you'd like us to do that.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. Just a quick question from me, Karen. Sustainable Dementia Assessment Service. This is an area that, am I right in saying that we have very limited people involved in, and therefore it's, I suppose, succession planning is listed here, and it says February 2021. I just wonder when we're going to see any plans for that then before February, because the year is running in fast.
Happy to share them for the next meeting. Absolutely, we've got plans around what we're doing. Is trying to kind of keep directions high level and not having too much detail in. But yeah, it's 2 nurses within that service, one of whom retired and then came back on a year's contract to do some bank while we look at what training is needed, because it's kind of a specialist niche skill set that's needed for the service. Although we call it dementia assessment, they do much more than just assess and diagnose. They support people with dementia. They support the care centres and people in their homes whose behaviour changes. So it is around what skill set we need and how we develop, how we grow our own and how we develop locally. So happy to share more detail for the next meeting.
That's fine, thanks for that, Canon. I think it's a really important area because it is an area that is, like you say, there's much more to it than assessment. And I think sometimes people maybe aren't aware of that. So I'd appreciate just a little bit more information of what we're doing to ensure the sustainability of that service. So that'd be good. Thank you. Any further questions? I'm not seeing anybody with their hand up. So are we happy to approve the directions for adult mental health? Jane?
Yes, happy to approve.
Happy to approve? Bobby's happy to approve? Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing nobody say anything other. Thank you very much, Karen. And next in my pack, I have pharmacy prescribing. Not sure who's presented on that one. Sorry, Chris, is that you? Please go ahead.
Hello, yes, thank you. I'm glad to see the direction here today for approval. As some of you know, I've not been at work for the last, for 6 months or the last year. So Mary McFarlane, the principal pharmacist, has kindly prepared the directions. So I'm just going to ask her to present them to the meeting just now. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Chris. Yeah, if you'd just like to go ahead, Mary, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Pharmacy and prescribing, the direction is really very wide-ranging and includes providing pharmaceutical services within the hospital, governance around prescribing both in hospital and primary care, contract arrangements and their delivery in community pharmacy, management of prescribing costs, support, training and governance in medicines use and administration in social care settings, and pharmaceutical expertise and pharmacotherapy in GP practices. So I thought I would highlight just 3 areas that might be of particular interest to people this afternoon. These will be pharmacotherapy, our work in the care sector, and also hospital electronic prescribing and medicines administration. So first of all, pharmacotherapy. This was a word that none of us knew 3 years ago, but it turned up in the GP contract when it was renewed 3 years ago, and it gave a mandate to the primary care pharmacy team to do the work that they had been doing for some time, and also made it much more specific about what we should be doing. So this is very much a work in progress. We've started the work and we've engaged a number of staff that are carrying it out. It includes work on the repeat prescribing system, making sure that appropriate monitoring is in place to show that the medicines are actually working, audit to see if the medicines that we're using are appropriate to local or national guidance. It makes sure that we carry out medicines reconciliation. That's a term that basically means check each time a patient goes into hospital or comes out of hospital or has been at a clinic appointment and there might have been changes to medicines, we reconcile the medicines list. So we make sure that everything is correct on that list. We also, under the pharmacotherapy heading, we also do polypharmacy reviews, which is about looking at a patient who has a lot of medicines and making sure that the medicines are all still indicated, that they have something going on in their health that means that they still need that medicine. It's easy for a condition to improve, but the medicine to be left on inadvertently, or for there to be side effects that mean that another drug is started, when in fact, if we had a look at what was there already, we might be able to avoid more drugs being added. So a once for all look at the polypharmacy is a really good thing to keep medicines in check. And the last area of pharmacotherapy is that of independent prescriber. Most of our pharmacists are independent prescribers and run clinics. So we're involved in clinics for asthma, diabetes, dermatology, and also mental health. So that's pharmacotherapy and what we're doing in that area. The second area involves providing assurance of appropriate medicines use in care settings. We provide advice for care staff around medicines use. We provide staff training in medicine storage and administration. And we provide an assessment and advice service on how to use medicines safely for individual clients. So, for example, a family might be concerned that their elderly relative is no longer managing their medicines, and so our pharmacy technician would go to the individual's home, take a look at what medicines they're on, perhaps look at what's in the cupboard. Sometimes that can be a great quantity. Look at what they can manage to take. Can they take the medicines out the blister pack, for example? It can be very simple things like that. Out of that, we might have one of three different recommendations. We might simply provide a compliance chart to help the individual to actually see what's to be taken when, or we might decide that they need some kind of compliance aid, some kind of box whereby the medicines are sorted out into meal times and make it easy for their administration, or the final one is that the individual is actually no longer safe managing their medicines themselves and they need help from a relative or a friend, or if none of these are available, perhaps social care input. So that helps us to provide assurance of how medicines are taken for people in the community in care settings. The last area is around hospital electronic prescribing and medicines administration. That's a bit of a mouthful. We've shortened it to HEPMA, but basically it's about prescribing electronically within the hospital setting. At the moment, when an individual goes into hospital, the doctor will write their medicines by hand onto a paper Cardex. The nurses will then administer the medicine and record the administration by hand onto the paper Cardex. This is a system that has served well for many years, but you can see easily that it's open to mistakes and bad handwriting, and it would be good to improve it in this electronic world. We believe that this system will improve the medicine safety for patients and also their quality of care. Medicines will be prescribed from a drop-down list, and the nurses will administer the medicines and then record it electronically, and there will be a reconciliation once every 24 hours to make sure that everything has been given appropriately. It will also improve our discharge process. At the moment, the doctors have to write the discharge by hand onto a paper. A lot of mistakes are made. It's easy in a pressurised world to not get things correct. And so a lot of time is wasted getting the prescription correct in the first place. In the future, with HEPMA, we'll be able to produce the discharge prescription at the touch of a button for dispensing, and that will mean that patients will be able to leave the hospital a bit more quickly. It also means that the GP will be able to get an accurate record of what medicines the patient has been discharged on within a few minutes of them being discharged. We're really looking forward to this system being in place. It's exciting because we're working at a regional level on this project. Shetland is just one of 6 North of Scotland health boards involved in the project, and it's really beginning to come together quickly now. and we're looking forward to having it in place. However, we're still at risk from COVID on this project. We expected to have it in place this month. It's been put off until March or April, but at the moment it may be July or August before it's actually in place. But we do expect that it will be in place and that it really will improve the lot of our patients in the hospital, but also our patients in the community. I hope these things have been of interest to you. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, we'll open it up for questions. Robbie.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Mary, for your presentation. I'll return to my favourite topic, which is the use of skills that are available in community pharmacy. I would gratefully acknowledge the advice I've had from yourself, Chris and Tony, regarding the asthma clinic that Caroline Shewan was running. I know there was difficulty with our hours and funding. My first question is, I just wondered if there's an opportunity for the IJB to commission services of this nature. And my second point, very much the flavour of the month just now, there's going to be a considerable need for COVID administration in view of the fact that progress has been made with licensing of the various vaccines. I just wondered if consideration was being given to use the skills and qualifications within community pharmacy in Shetland to assist with the administration, which no doubt is going to be an onerous task indeed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Robbie. Mary, would you like to come back in on that?
Yes, within Caroline's asthma clinic, we're looking at ways ahead for that. There may be a need for an application for funding from the IJB, but we're still in the process of finding a way ahead. But it is our intention to try to reinstate that clinic. Your other question, Robbie, around the COVID vaccine, yes, indeed, the skills that the community pharmacists have in terms of vaccination will be taken into consideration and may well be used as the process starts.
That's good, thank you very much. Jim?
It's this possibility of having to train a new pharmacy technician. Right? You know, I would prefer if we could train somebody from Shetland. I think we would have a better retention, possibility, than bringing people in from outside. I'm just wondering if that, could be made part of the plan as such, that we've already trained people from Shetland to be pharmacy technicians. I'm just wondering if we cannot just continue that on that path.
Mary, do you want to come in?
Yes, Jim, you're absolutely right. We have trained, I think, 6 pharmacy technicians in the time that I've been in Shetland, and that has been a real benefit to us. We will continue with that process, and yes, it will actually be much easier to train our own than to get a pharmacy technician to come into the island, because they're in very short supply on the mainland as well as here. So it most likely will be training one from scratch here in Shetland.
Does that answer your question, Jim?
I'm just wondering if we can change the wording of that, so that we go ahead with this training, not just a possibility, but go ahead, with the training of a pharmacy technician.
I see Jo has her hand up, so she might want to come in on this. Jo?
Thanks, Chair. It was just to say, I think what the intention is to try as hard as we possibly can to make it somebody local. But I think it's hard to guarantee that if for some reason we weren't able to find somebody local to be trained, then we would need to look elsewhere. So I think I don't know if you're happy with that being our absolute intention, rather than us giving you the absolute guarantee that we could do that.
Jim?
I could understand what Joe's saying, you know what I mean? But, you know, I mean, have we been going around schools and sort of, you know, promote this and see if we can get, you know, a youngster that's finishing up in Anderson High School, you know, and bring them forward. You know, at least there's a career path there, and you can show them that. You know, I don't know what you're doing then, Mary.
Back in on it, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes, the last time there was a careers fair at Anderson High, 3 of our pharmacy technicians were there and spoke to a number of pupils who were interested in that as a career pathway. So yes, we're certainly very keen on that process. Part of the issue for some of the posts that we might need to bring forward is around a level of seniority and experience that they require. So it's possible that, you know, it would take, in order to reach that level of seniority, it would probably take 3 or 4 years of training, and we may need somebody faster than that. So we may advertise, but we may not get anyone for that post, and we then may have to delay that piece of work until we can get somebody trained.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you. Natasha?
So just very briefly, I'm hearing what Jim is saying, but I think my concern would be around, whilst I support recruiting locally if we possibly can, I think that the emphasis should be on the right person for the job. And if that means it's somebody that comes from South, I'd be happy as long as it was the right person. So I would have concerns around changing that wording.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you there, Natasha. I hear what Jim's saying, and I think we have been reassured that they will try and recruit locally, but it ultimately has to be the right person for the right job. So I would agree with that. Did you want to say anything else, Natasha?
No, that's everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have any further questions on pharmacy and prescribing? No? Any comments? Are we happy to approve the directions? I'm seeing nobody say no, so I'm going to take that as a yes. We're happy to do so. Yep. Robbie, you're in the room. You happy with that?
I'm very happy.
Very happy with that. Okay. Jane? Yeah. Okay, it's very difficult when you're sitting remotely and you don't actually see people around the table nodding their heads, so that's fine. So that has been approved. So now we move on to substance misuse, recovery team, health improvement, adult social work. And Wendy, I think, is going to talk us through some of this. If you want to just go ahead.
Hi, can I just check that you can hear me okay, because my mic is a bit...
Yeah, no, we can hear you fine.
Excellent, thank you. I'm just going to talk about the alcohol and drug partnership one, so that is what covers substance use. So the direction is a little bit different in layout to how it's been previously, and I think reflects the complex relationship between ADPs and IJBs. And the ADP sits under the IJB, but also ADPs have responsibility for delivering services and interventions for children as well as adults. So the children's services here are included in this direction too. So the activities that we're looking at, just an overview of those, is to provide education, and that's to children and young people, parents and carers, and to community groups and workplace groups, to provide a drug detection and deterrent service, to provide supported work placements, to provide ABI training to support delivery for the board target, to provide alcohol screening, supported behaviour change, information and signposting, engagement into treatment, alcohol and drug treatment programmes, and the detail of those alcohol and drug treatment programmes are contained within the mental health direction that's already been presented by Karen. To provide psychosocial interventions, harm reduction interventions, pre and post-treatment support, assertive outreach, residential rehab, community engagement, and alcohol and drug profiling projects. And in terms of the improvement plan, there's lots of work ongoing nationally around how we respond better to people who are affected by substance use, to reduce harm and ultimately to reduce deaths, particularly in response to the national drug death crisis. So the improvement plan kind of reflects the national priorities as they fit with our local need. So I'm happy to take any questions that anybody's got.
That's really good. Thanks very much, Wendy. Do we have any questions on that member? John?
Thank you again, Chair, and thank you, Mrs. McConaughey. I have two questions. The first question, Wendy, was with regard to education. Seldom is there anything more powerful than a shared life experience. Has any thought been given with regard to asking people that are in long-term sustained recovery, speaking to the young people in Shetland with regard to their life experiences of their active addiction and thereafter their life in recovery?
Want to come back in, Wendy?
Thanks. Yeah.
Wendy, can I just stop you there? Your sound has gone quite crackly. It's not very clear to make you out.
I'll just try switching.
That's a bit
better. That sounded a bit better?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I think we've struggled in Shetland to engage with people in recovery communities, and I think that that's not unusual for remote and rural places where it's more difficult to be kind of public about maybe past experiences and about your recovery path and your journey that you're on. But certainly working with people in recovery is something that we are trying to do a lot more of, and it's certainly something that's being pushed nationally too. And we're hoping with the introduction of the new recovery hub that is a way forward, that we can really include people with lived experience and start to look at including them in things like education programmes, because I think it really is so valuable to include the voices of lived experience.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Did you have other questions, John?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you very much for that response, Wendy. It's just I think the Recovery Hub may well be act as a fantastic catalyst for people being willing to engage with other young people and share their life experience, which I think will be immensely powerful, and I'll take a great interest in that going forward. The other question I had was with regard to residential rehabilitation. I'm going to avoid the expression on island and off island. It's just, but it is desirable to have people to enter into recovery and sustain the recovery in their home setting. But it will come a point just where, for whatever a multitude of reasons, that is no longer an option, and the residential rehab may have to be a consideration. What I'd like to ask is that, does Wendy or anybody else, or those operating within the service, have statistics with regard to the number of Shetland residents that have been referred to and taken up the offer of residential rehab, and moreover, details of the success in reaching the predetermined outcomes? And finally, on that, are there objective triggers in place to act as a catalyst for that conversation to be held with service users, to see if if residential rehab is the option for them. And I suppose actually a final question on that would be that there's a relatively small allocation of budget to substance misuse recovery. Is residential rehab being cost prohibitive, and hence the reason that it's not highlighted more in the directions report?
I see Jo's got her hand up, so I don't know if you want to come in before Wendy, Jo.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser, for your question. I just wanted to note that Karen Smith, unfortunately, has already had to leave the meeting to attend another meeting, and she's the person who would probably be most able to answer those questions. So I wondered if we could prepare a briefing for you in response to those questions, rather than trying to answer them at this meeting. Thank you. I think
that would be helpful. I see that Peter McDonnell had his hand up as well, if he maybe wants to come in on a point.
Yeah, we do have a worker within our service that specialises in undertaking the assessments for the rehabilitation. And in terms of the budget, I mean, it is fixed. I mean, there's been a standstill budget for a range of different services over the years, but it is variable. Some years there's an underspend in that, in other years, then, dependent on need, there has been some overspend. So, we do continue to explore that in terms of focusing on individuals' needs. We do have some information that I recall gathering for a Freedom of Information request quite recently that we could pull together alongside what Jo was saying for Councillor Fraser. So I'm sure we could contribute to understanding some of that, which includes kind of longer term sustainability as well once folk have come out of rehab.
Thank you very much. Wendy, did you want to come in?
Just really to agree with Jo and Peter's points. Sorry, you're struggling to hear me again. Just really to agree with Jo and Peter's points, and certainly I'd be happy to go away and work with colleagues to prepare something to present back to Councillor Fraser.
I would welcome that. Thank you very much, everybody, for the response.
Thank you. Okay, I've got questions from Robbie.
Thank you very much, Chair. Must apologise. There's been a lot of good strategy in all the papers that have been presented this afternoon. So I really must apologise again for getting down into the nitty-gritty. I'm quite impressed by the Police Scotland initiative that they're running a trial in Falkirk, Dundee and Glasgow East at the moment on naloxone nasal spray for heroin and other opiate ODs. I just wondered if perhaps an opportunity should be taken, first of all, to liaise with the local police, because 6 months is a very short period, and it may well be that the possibility of this being rolled out in Shetland might present itself. And secondly, and I'm really flying a kite here, I wonder if there's an opportunity for naloxone nasal spray to be used in other sites. Perhaps pharmacy colleagues might have an input in there that time is of the essence in these cases, and the availability of this spray could be life-saving. So I'd be interested to hear any comments.
Wendy, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. That's a really good point, and something that's of great interest both to me and, of course, ADPs nationally. I have had discussions at our local ADP meetings in the past with local Police Scotland officers, and really everything is kind of hinging on this pilot that they're doing on the mainland, but certainly discussions will be continuing locally, kind of in preparation for that hopefully being rolled out wider. In response to naloxone in wider settings, we are currently working to get naloxone available at the new recovery hub, and there is a new shift in Scotland as well to make naloxone available from non-drug treatment services. So we have actually been looking into making naloxone available to various support workers and that kind of thing, making naloxone certainly available at community pharmacies. So all that kind of work is ongoing, but certainly having the backing of the IJB to go forward with that work would be absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, Wendy. That was really helpful, Robbie. Do you want to come back in?
How would the IJB formally give backing to this initiative?
Chris has got his hand up. You want to come in, Chris?
Hello, yes. One of the other issues that we need to think about with a wider use of naloxone, which in broad principles I absolutely welcome, but we've got to think about the whole accountability aspect around controlled drugs. So I know that the Local Intelligence Network, which is a group that look at sharing intelligence between services across the Grampian, Orkney and Shetland. They meet tomorrow and I'll be at that meeting, and naloxone nasal sprays will be discussed there. So it's just understanding how they're going to fit in with the whole arrangements of making these things available, and making sure that that there are no unintended consequences with introducing them. So I would prefer, from my angle, that we defer recommending that this is supported by the IJB until we actually understand the governance issues and maybe in a wee bit more detail.
That's really helpful, thank you. Do you want to come in again, Robbie?
Very happy about Chris's advice, and we'll await developments in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any further comments or questions on this one, members? I'm not seeing anybody's hands up, so I'd be happy to approve the directions for this one. Yeah, I think we are. Thank you very much, Wendy. Okay, and then if we move on, Joe, did you want to come in?
Yes, so sorry, I was just breaking in to say that it's me introducing the next direction, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Go ahead, Joe. Be on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I'm introducing the next direction because the issue of unpaid carers really runs across all the services that we deliver through the Health and Social Care Partnership. We've tried to focus this direction on not only historically assessed needs for carers, but also some of the needs that have emerged during the COVID pandemic to ensure that we're really responding to the most up-to-date needs. So there's quite a lot of research done around carers and how they have experienced life through the pandemic, and so we've taken that into account in formulating this direction. So some of the things that are most important are really about providing support for the health, well-being, and particularly the emotional impact of caring, and ensuring greater control over resources so that people really are able to have that element of personalisation and choice and empowerment over living their lives as a carer and with their cared for person. One of the things that is quite important for us to do going forward is also ensuring the sustainability of some of our third sector contracts. So working with our third sector colleagues to try and make sure that they are sustainable in some of the services they're providing for unpaid carers as well. One of the other things that really came to the fore during COVID was the financial impact of caring, and carers reporting reduced, the outcome we would like to work towards is that carers are able to report reduced financial pressure and have increased control and the ability to choose flexible and person-centred support. So we would work to maximise income and also Department of Work and Pensions uptake in order that carers have access to their own resources with which to choose services with. Also, we're looking at the concept of reimagining days, which is working alongside the people who delivered the community-led support programme to look at what would a whole different type of daycare look like for people, for cared for people going forward. And that also people being able to achieve their outcomes also provides relief for unpaid carers. So I think I'm happy just to take any queries about that direction.
Thank you very much for that, John. I think it's right that you have presented it because it does touch so many different areas. So thank you for that. Jane?
Hello, thank you. Yes, it's very important to take the experiences from COVID and build that into the direction. So I think that's happened here. One of the disadvantages within a very vulnerable group has been at transition stage, and that already was an issue that has come up a lot in discussions at IJB. I was looking for some recognition specifically within this direction to look at the transition between starting earlier and how we reach in and support that transitions in a multidisciplinary but also joint from the point of view of the young person, that it is a joint, seamless transition. So that's my first point. I wanted, Jo, if you had thoughts on adding that specifically into this direction.
I know Peter's got his hand up. I'm not sure who wants to go first, Peter or Jo.
Go first.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jo. I just wanted, I suppose, in terms of picking up on that, we had a meeting this morning, a multi-agency meeting with Health and Education and Children's Social Work, picking up on the transitions agenda again. And actually, when I was looking at it, because having just had our adult social work directions through at the last meeting and now looking at revising them yet again, it did occur to me that transitions was missing from that. And I do kind of wonder if that's the better place to. I mean, I completely get what Jane is saying there in terms of unpaid carers, but I think it probably sits better with adult social work and being a direction within that in terms of developing our transition planning in conjunction with other partners.
Thank you, Peter. Do you want to come back in, Jane, or do you want to let Jo in?
Can let Jo in.
Okay, Jo, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I suppose I was just going to agree with Peter, and I think obviously those directions will be revised again for next year, for 2021-22. So we are starting looking at that again already. I agree with Peter. I think that would be a good place to put that. I think I know it's not specifically in this direction. I think we can give you our assurance that it's not, that it's definitely on our agendas. But I think adding it properly to the adult social work direction for when it comes back again in readiness for April next year would be probably the most appropriate place to put it, if that is okay with you.
Thank you, and I take that, and I think yes, absolutely. I'm heartened to hear that it will be added into the adult social work, and I suppose in a way I would argue that it's coming from a different perspective for the carers, but it's equally important because you're transitioning from the parental within children's, so there's a transition for a carer as well from that perspective. So I suppose I would like to see it in the carers direction as well, because I think it is a unique experience for a carer in that transitional from the actual young person themselves, if that makes sense.
Jo, do you want to come back in? I think Brian's got his hand up and so does Peter. So.
I think just to say I absolutely accept that, Jane. I think that's a a really useful point to make. So we can either add something to this direction and bring it back, or we could, at the point we review this in readiness for April next year as well, we could add it in at that stage. I think it's probably whichever is easiest.
Brian, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's just to provide some reassurance that this has been discussed quite recently. I had a conversation with the Chief Social Work Officer last week just about transitions and what we're going to have to review. And I think we have an away day within the Health and Social Care Partnership for the executive managers. That I think that would be a good forum to start to discuss some of this complexity and kind of the support networks that are required right across the system. So I totally acknowledge the conversation about, you know, where this lies within directions, and that there is a different perspective from an individual who's going through transition, as well as their carers who, you know, will have that feeling from a different perspective and maybe a different journey. So I'm really happy to take the points today away to feed into that kind of review and maybe look at it more holistically from both sides of the journey, if that makes sense, through transition and work out how we make the connections to make that a lot more fluid.
And Peter, you wanted to come in as well?
Yeah, again, I think that I can see where there does need to be interconnectivity, and if you look at the adult social work directions, it does, you know, one of the performance aspects of that is carer support plans. I mean, what I would add just to what Brian and Joe were saying is that there is a transitions working group which is receiving a reboot. I think to a large extent, actually, not to some extent, to a large extent, COVID and COVID response has got in the way of that. But we do have good connections with ARC Scotland in terms of the principles of good transition and the work that's going on nationally there. And we also have to recognise the statutory responsibilities that education have in terms of supporting that discussion as well. So we are absolutely focused on the need to, well, I mean, revise our protocols, but also to ensure that practice goes with the protocols, because we could have the best written process, but you know, the practice needs to follow that. And again, collectively across, I think, NHS Shetland, our Health and Social Care Partnership and SIC, we absolutely see that there's a need to improve practice on this locally.
Thank you, Peter. Did you want to come back in, James?
Yeah, just to say that's good to note that it is high up on the agenda and the action is happening. So thank you for that reassurance. And perhaps it might be when we come on to talk about the business, it might be that a paper comes looking at where we are before the next directions, and then we would look to revise in the next directions as well. But I'm happy with those comments, and I think it's a good conversation to have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, do we have any further questions? Jim?
One of the things I've got here is on performance reporting, right? You know, this is talking about SDS. It says assessments completed by target date. I mean, what is the target date? Is it, you know, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? You know, and reviews completed within time limits as well. Yeah, that's doesn't really tell me anything.
Joe, I think you can maybe answer that one.
There are set timescales for assessments to be done within 21 days. So I think we are looking at explaining that better in our actual performance reporting. So we're currently just collating data to come back to the next IJB with our quarterly performance reporting, and that will be more specific about those timescales. But again, we could take that as a note to be more specific in the next iteration of directions.
Yeah. Likewise, with carer support plans, there's nothing in the Carers Act that lays down a time scale, Joe. I'm just wondering if we could have a, you know, if a time scale could be put down, right? Because I've been to other meetings, and some people have waited months and months. You know, and I'm just wondering if we could, you know, in our directions or somewhere, say what timescales we're going to sort of support these people, so they have an idea of what's happening. Sorry, that's me finished. Yes, Joe.
Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. I understand where you're coming from, Jim. I think targets can be useful in some ways in that they encourage the work to be done, but sometimes we also need to bear in mind that some people it takes a lot longer to go through the whole process with somebody. Sometimes you're moving at the pace that the carer can kind of cope with working at, and so having fixed targets isn't always the most helpful. You're trying to do it in line or kind of in tune with the person you're working with, so sometimes the effort to finish an assessment within a very tight timescale is actually ends up with not such a good outcome for the person that you're working with. So I do understand that. I think it would be good to have targets that we kind of aimed for, but that there was some understanding around why some processes might take longer because you're working at the pace of the person that you're working with.
Thanks, Joe. I agree with that. Well, could we have a target from application to starting, you know, so that somebody knows that if they apply for a support plan, that they're going to get it within, you know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks. Right? You know, because somebody's asked for something, you know, and they're sitting there wondering how long is this going to take, I wonder.
Yep. Joe, do you want to come back in, and then I've got Peter wanting in as well.
I think Peter might be able to answer this.
Okay, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I think it's part of an ongoing process, as Joe said. I mean, I would say primarily the contacts we get are in relation to the supported person, and the assessment process in terms of putting in to get together a support package for them. I mean, workers are then engaging with the unpaid carer in terms of their own needs as an unpaid carer. So I mean, it's a bit of a complex myriad at times. We don't ordinarily get many people contacting us solely for a support plan as an unpaid carer. It's usually enmeshed within the two processes. But I mean, I completely take what you're saying, and I think we do need to look at that in terms of our wider performance management and monitoring, in terms of what we set within that, and also constantly reminding staff that they need to consider the needs of the carers within the processes that they're undertaking as well.
Thank you, Peter. Do you want to come back, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, with respect to SDS, you see, one of the biggest problems that carers have is that a lot of carers don't know that they could be, in line to have an SDS package as well to help them, not just for the cared for, but for the carer. And this seems to be forgotten in a lot of cases. I'm just wondering how we approach this in Shetland, if Peter could help me.
Peter, go ahead.
Well, I mean, that should be part of the day-to-day conversation that our staff are having. That may be that there's a further bit of work that needs to be done across the wider partnership, because it's the assessments are undertaken in localities as well. But I mean, I'm certainly not necessarily not seeing that in terms of what comes in and across my desk in terms of the self-directed support requests. I mean, we've got a statutory responsibility to offer folk the 4 options, and I think generally people are really pretty good at doing that, and certainly within this kind of COVID period, there's been a bit of a move towards that in terms of supporting unpaid carers. So it's if there are particular examples that Jim's able to kind of highlight, we could maybe speak offline about that and pick up on those issues.
Thank you, Peter. I see that Jan has his hand up, so is there something you want to come in on, Jan?
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. And The only thing I think I would caution in terms of where this discussion or debate is going is that we need to bear in mind and keep in mind that directions are very much about how the IJB directs the parties in relation to delivery of services. What it is not is an opportunity for the individual receivers of the service to have a contract, created through the directions that's enforceable by them, for example. So there's something about the language that is very clear and directive in its tone about the service that the IJB expects the local authority or the health board to provide. But where that potentially goes just a bit too far is if it starts defining specifically the service that the in this case carer would receive. I mean, I think that there's something about the direction also addressing performance matters, so that's fair enough, but again, that's very much about what the IJB would want to see happen, rather than something that a carer could then point to and say, I have been contractually let down because I didn't get what I was expecting within a certain number of weeks. I think then there's the opportunity for the IJB to challenge what the actual service provides, but that's not in the context of setting a direction, really. That's more about perhaps a later report or a conversation between the officers and the IJB directly. So I'm not saying that it's impossible for a direction to get down to this level. In doing that, with the wording that you didn't create essentially third-party rights in the hands of customers of the service, when really the direction is the relationship between the IJB and, as I said before, either the SIC or the health board who it's directed at. Thank you for allowing me in.
Thank you very much for that, Jan. I don't know if you wanted to come back on that at all, Joe?
No, I'm quite happy there now, thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments on paid carers? Jane?
Sorry, just this is the only direction that has the statement about budgets being across different, which I fully appreciate, but I suppose it's that transparency of budget as well. But again, that could be something that we discuss out with this. But this particular direction does have that. There isn't a specific transparency of the budgets. It talks about that being across. But I see Joe's coming in, so that's lovely. Thank you.
Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. This has been queried with us a few times. So we've got Sheila Duncan and Carl Williamson had both done quite a lot of work around where the money can be tracked to. It is very difficult to tie it down specifically, but we could provide a briefing on that detail if you wanted it.
That would be helpful, I think, Joe, just to clarify that, because I think that's a good point. Jan, do you want to come in?
I actually held back when you were having the conversation around the complexities to do with transitions, because I was tempted to come in and say, well, to a large extent, the answer might be given by where the budget lies, because one of the things that it would be anomalous for you to do is to create a situation where through a direction it was quite obvious who accountable officers were, but then how you achieve what you're trying to achieve is actually a budget that's managed by somebody else. So I'm only putting that thought in there, not to give you the answer or the solution, but I imagine that in the complexity of what you're trying to achieve with a further refinement of these directions going forward, just don't lose sight of the fact that the money has to follow the direction and be properly dispensed to the party that's got accountability. So yeah, I think I'm just actually increasing the complexity here rather than resolving it. But as I say, the money must lie with accountability as well. So that is a consideration going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Jan. Okay. Do we have any further comments or questions on paid carers? Not seeing any hands up or anybody coming off mute. So are we happy to approve that direction for unpaid carers? Yeah. I'm not seeing anybody say otherwise, so I'll take that as a yes. And that concludes agenda item 1 and all the directions. And we have taken a considerable amount of time over that, which I think is appropriate, because it is important that we do consider them and consider them all separately, because they all have an awful lot of value. But I am aware that we are now just heading to agenda item 2, and we do have a fair few things to get through before 5. So I don't want to limit questions or debate, but if we could just try and keep them as often as possible, we can get through it before 5, because I don't want to reconvene the reconvened meeting at a later date. So on that, if we could head to agenda item 2, and that is the Shetland Islands Health and Social Care Partnership Annual Performance Report, and that's Brian to present.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give a little bit of a background to the substance of the report. The Public Bodies and Joint Working Scotland Act 2014 stipulated that health and social care partnerships should publish an annual performance report no later than 4 months after the previous end of financial year, which is the 31st of July. This is the 4th annual report for the Shetland Health and Social Care Partnership. However, its publication has been delayed this year due to the COVID-19 management and outbreak and pandemic. Just to add some thanks to the Deputy Director, the Public Health, the Planning Team and the Risk and Data Analysis for their input into putting this report together. The purpose of which is to provide an overview of performance in our planning and carrying out integrated functions, as well as, and I think this is quite important, is celebrating success and learning across the Health and Social Care Partnership. I'm going to break sort of the report down into quality, performance, finance and risk. There's definitely been an improvement in how we're working with local communities in our participation and engagement piece, and this is demonstrated by the story about the Caring for Bressa project, as well as community-led support. Also in there, some of the strategy that's been developed and protocols, including the palliative and end-of-life strategy, which was actually really key when we entered the pandemic phase, that we had something of such quality therefore at hand that was specific to Shetland. I'd also like to draw some attention to the Otago Moor project, where a falls coordinator was funded by IJB reserves. We're now scaling up this project. It started with pilots in Unstonyell. That's gone and led to falls prevention classes. 155 people have attended the programme or the maintenance classes, and 55 have followed home exercise programme. And we've tailored the programmes to fit in with the ask from each population or each locality, and it's been co-designed as such. Results of which are pretty impressive. 80% of the participants improved regarding their fear of falling, and 90% had improved strength and balance. And if we follow that quality through to performance measurement, our falls rate per 1,000 people has dropped well below the Scottish average. So it kind of demonstrates that the quality leading to a change in performance. Talking regarding performance, on the whole, good performance was demonstrated by the Health and Social Care Partnership during this year. The care inspector grades were 95% of the inspections were good or better. For our patients, we had lower readmission rates to hospital. Patients were spending less time in hospital after an emergency. We had delayed discharge rate, and we're the best performing partnership for people spending most proportion of their last 6 months of life at home or in their communities. But there is some work to be done regarding performance, psychological therapy, waiting times, to name one. We've just discussed the carers direction and our support to carers. Although we are significantly higher than the national average in feedback, we would like to do better. On the financial front, at the year end of the 31st of March 2020, the IJB generated a surplus of £73,000. However, it needs to be acknowledged for IJB commission services, the overall deficit against budget was £1.95 million. And to make this small surplus a one-off payment was required by NHS Shetland to the IJB in the sum of 2.6 million. So it's a good reminder the financial challenge and risk will continue as the IJB tries to mitigate the financial risk and rising costs and reduced funding. The midterm financial plan will follow with an update, following an update of the SIC and NHS Shetland financial planning processes. And the planning and directing of service is key to addressing the financial challenges. And in doing so, we've established a performance monitoring group to link quality, performance, finance and risk management. But it's just also, just as I finish up, to highlight the risks regarding COVID, Brexit and recovery of services and remobilisation, which will all be still coming to fruition towards the end of this financial year and the beginning of the next financial year. Happy to take any questions or points from the floor, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, we'll open it up to questions. Any questions, members? Not seen an influx of hands being raised. Any comments? No? Unless my buttons aren't working, I'm not seeing anybody coming off mute or raising their hand. I think this report really highlights that all the staff involved in any area of health and social care partnership are working incredibly hard to provide the best services they can to our communities. There's challenges, but I think by working together we are overcome them, and I think we will continue to do so. So we're being asked to note the delay in this performance report and approve. Are we happy to do both of those things? Yep. Yep, I'm seeing nobody say otherwise, so we're happy to do that. Okay. Does that need to be formally done, Lisa, or is that okay?
Happy to take unanimous on this one too.
Jan, go ahead.
Chair, just as provider of corporate services, I suppose it's almost not my lot to be saying this, but having heard some of the very positive things that Brian Chittick has said to you in presenting this report, I was reflecting on some of the decisions of the IJB before, and now that you're seeing the fruition, I suppose, or the coming to terms with the outcomes that you've generated by decisions you've made in relation to, might seem like a small thing, but the falls prevention initiative, for example. I just wonder if there is something by way of publicity that maybe the comms teams of the NHS and the council could help Brian with and putting out sort of a press release of the IJB and being particularly impressed with some of the things that have been said today. The Bressa initiative, for example, I mean, I know how far progressed the council now is with a proposal for the community asset at the Bressa school to be put through a asset transfer proposal, and part of that was very much the outcome of the initiative that was run on Bressa. So again, I think there's just something about how often we celebrate success, and the IJB is doing a good job in these areas, and it was good of Brian to draw it to your attention in this annual report.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and apologies for not maybe picking up on so many of them and highlighting them as much as I should have. But yeah, I think we probably take it for granted because we're seeing reports on it and seeing the information, but we're maybe not very good at sharing the successes. So I think what you've said is a really good point, and hopefully we'll be able to put something out, or some kind of press release to get that out, Brian, to just highlight some of the really good work that's happened. Brian?
Happy to tie that in, Chair, with the release of the report. Now it's been approved by IJB, and we'll look at how we publicise some of the good news stories in that. Thank you. That's really good.
Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to agenda item 3, and that's the financial monitoring report to the 30th of September, and I believe Carl is going to present that one. Carl? Sorry, you're really quiet. I can't quite make you out.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's the financial monitoring report to the 30th of September. The year-end position for delegated services is an overspend of 850,000 as at the 31st of March 21. This overspend consists of a 685,000 underspend against SIC delivered services and a 1.535 million overspend against NHS services. The breakdown by service area and the reasons for the variances can be seen in Appendix 1. So the 685,000 underspent will need to be returned to the SIC as per the integration scheme. So a recovery plan is needed to address the full 1.535 million overspend on the NHS side. A recovery plan has been included in Appendix 2, which will, if delivered, result in a break-even position for the IJB as a separate legal entity. You're being asked to approve this today. So the recovery plan is simply a means by which we can achieve break-even this year, and it doesn't contain the longer-term redesign proposals you may have expected to see at this stage. The plan is for the sustainable redesign projects to form part of the strategic commissioning plan and associated directions going forward. You've just seen the directions template, so there's a column in there that has project reference number. So what I envisage going forward is we'll have project references number in here. It'll tie the strategic commissioning plan, directions and performance and medium-term financial plan all together. You're probably aware that NHS is introducing a project management office, so that will start to take shape early next year, and I see them sort of overseeing the projects, and each project with a clear PMO reference number that will become part of this directions, and I think that'll link all this together. So included in the recovery plan is a request for additional funds from NHS Shetland of 1.266 million. So this request is significantly lower than the request last year, as Brian has just said in his report. That was 2.7 million we needed last year, and in 18-19 we needed even more, a 3.5 million. So this lower request does signal an improvement in the budget setting process, but we're still faced with a significant overspend in year due to temporary staffing requirements in mental health, GPs and hospital consultants. There's clearly a specific challenge around recruitment and retention of medical staff, and this should be a priority area as the IJB plans ahead for 21-22. And you've heard in earlier directions, Kathleen and Karen both spoke about maybe designing new contracts that can attract doctors to Shetland. So all that's very important if we're looking to address this situation. So I think in simple terms, if we weren't having to pay for this expensive locums, we would be looking at a break-even position for the IJB. If we move on to COVID costs, we're still excluding them from the projections, as we still believe at this point the government will reimburse them in full. The cost projections are currently being reviewed and they're going to be submitted to the government again on the 30th of November. And after that, there'll be further discussions with the government until they release the next allocations in January 21. I'll keep you up to date with this in my future finance reports. So happy to take any questions on this.
Thank you very much for that, Carl, and I'll open it up for questions. John?
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Mr. Williamson, for your report. A question that I dare say is quite glaringly obvious to many. It says at 2.5, it is anticipated that all COVID-19 cost pressures will be fully funded by the Scottish Government and are therefore not factored into the current year-end projections. Experience tells me that I can't assume what the Scottish Government is going to or is not going to deliver. On what does Mr. Williamson base his anticipation that the Scottish Government will fully fund the COVID-19 cost pressures?
Carl?
That IJB Chief Financial Officers Network, and that's the message we're being told at this stage through that network. So that's the best information I hear at this point. And personally, I don't think the government's going to let health boards fail in a pandemic. And if the government doesn't fund the full COVID pressures, the NHS board will simply need to get brokerage, and that's money that needs to be paid back in future years. And I suppose the council side will need to use the reserves if they're not going to get fully funded. And I believe there was some discussion this morning about Jamie Manson was going to be speaking to Coslett about the SIC side of funding. But yeah, to answer your question, it's just information that's coming to the Chief Financial Network national meetings. And as far as the IJB is concerned, if the NHS gets brokerage, some of that will be passed as well, but that'll mean a repayment mechanism will need to be agreed to align to the NHS board's repayment to the government. But yeah, I can't promise anything at this stage.
Thank you for that, Carl. And Brian, do you want to come in on that point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's really just, I think the point that Councillor Fraser raises just really highlights the complexity of trying to undertake some form of financial planning in this financial year when we've had so much to deal with regarding the pandemic. We've been reassured that all reasonable costs would be covered by Scottish Government. We are able to have dialogue with Scottish Government, and there is another ask for some more planning that will take us through from the end of this financial year in the next financial year, and a paper will be brought to IJB in December outlining that ask, so we're cited on that as well. But I think it was just to say, I think we're at a stage now where it's just very, very complex, and I think when we're trying to just put it down on where we'll try and be at the end of the year, is I think Carl's just demonstrating how difficult that is at the minute, but it's not without risk, and I think that's the point of just trying to highlight that. But I can reassure the IJB that we're doing everything we can to ensure that our costs are reasonable and are deemed to be reasonable, and that we're working with the financial partners on both SIC and the NHS side.
Thank you, Brian. Do you want to come back in, John? Or?
Yeah, we'll come back in briefly, not with a supplementary question, but more just to kind of highlight the point that Mr. Chiswick and Mr. Williamson have actually just confirmed what I suspected, is that we are basing this recovery plan on an element of assumption, where it's that we are unable to ascertain the political will of the Scottish Government and just whether or not they will deliver. Rhetoric and good intentions are great, says, but I will keep my powder dry, says, until basically, says, I see the money in the bank account. Previous experience has told me that. I suppose the concern with me is that on a more localised level, take the Scottish Government political element aside, is that I am concerned that our recovery plan, if you can call it that, is dependent upon just the finance minister signing the cheque. What I would have liked to have seen perhaps is a contingency plan in order on how we are going to overcome the financial burden as a result of COVID-19 if that cheque doesn't go in the post. And I think actually Mr. Williamson has actually clarified that. What it's going to be left to is the Shetland Islands Council further raiding the reserves, and the NHS Shetland just basically having to go with the begging bowl that will have to be repaid back in future years. I hope that the Scottish Government does deliver. I have no reason to suspect that to believe that they won't. all that I'm trying to say is that we should err on the side of caution and not make any assumptions. Says until it's signed, sealed, and delivered. I watch with anticipation and an element of concern, but to end on a positive note, it's just that I'll keep the hope and keep the faith that it will be delivered. Thank you for allowing me to rattle on a bit.
Thank you for that, John, and I like that ending on a positive note. We like to keep things positive if we can. Natasha, did you have a question?
I'm not really sure it's a question as such. It's more really just a commenting around the budget. And I suppose my concern is more around the non-COVID costs than the COVID costs. Because to me, and it's been kind of unpicked in the discussion so far, there's a high level of a risk around the 1.266 million balancing payment that we're potentially looking for from the NHS. And I suppose just wanted to say that I feel more uncomfortable this year than I have in previous years, because we did start the year with a balanced budget, which was the first time that we had done that. So to be in a position of having to build another business case to get that balancing payment from the NHS, it concerns me, and it does concern me more than it has previous years. And I just think that we maybe need to be doing a bit more work out with the meeting on the budget and keeping the members informed.
Thank you, Natasha. I'm not sure if Brian wants to come back in on that or Carl first.
I'm happy to come back in, Chair. Thank you. No, I accept that point, Natasha, and what Councillor Fraser said as well about basing on assumptions and just the risk that is around and the uneasiness, particularly in this year. And more than happy to maybe use one of the seminars that's planned in December to start to discuss finance and just where we are and have those discussions, with members to keep them informed. I think I also just wanted to maybe come back about the recovery plan as well. There will be a point of now the directions have been approved is taking away the improvement plans that are in some of those directions and adding them to recovery plans, in particular around locum usage and out of hours kind of usage, and how we maybe look at where we can use our resource to best effect with best value. And also the rotational nursing model, which was discussed at our recent seminar, looking at now, we've engaged now with all the island, non-doctor island communities, or have a plan to, and we will start to be able to formulate a plan and then start to look at a financial backbone to that plan as well, and that can also align with recovery planning as well. So I think it was just again just reinforce the Chief Financial Officer's point that it's a live kind of recovery plan, and we will be adding to that. It's not a fait accompli, and that won't be developed any further before now. And the 31st of March, it will grow as we start to put more of those improvement plans on there.
Thank you for that, Brian. Did you want to add anything, Carl, before I ask the question?
We're conscious of the fact that the NHS doesn't fund for locum costs, so it was based on substantive posts. So there's still work to be done there, because I think at the start of the year we knew there'd be locum pressures, but that wasn't in the budget. So really the whole year's overspend is a result of that additional temporary staff. And so I think that's something we do need to discuss at seminars, and how we approach that. Does that become part of the negotiation next year's budget? Do we need to make sure there's a cushion for that? But speaking to NHS Shetland, if we increase the budgets, it simply increases the savings target, because there is just a limited amount of funds going around. So it's quite complex. We didn't get the NHS savings target at 850,000 this year, so that we started off in a much better position, but we still didn't get funded for that known locum costs.
Thank you, Carl. Just a quick question from me at 4.12, financial sustainability. I suppose my concerns are very similar to Natasha's, and not so much the COVID costs, because I do hope and have faith that the Scottish Government will deliver on those and reimburse those costs as they quite rightly should. My concern is, I suppose, the suggested savings target in the region of 3% will be required in each of the next 5 years. I've been on the IJB now for 3.5 years, and we are still waiting to see good, robust, smart recovery plans that align with our strategic plan. We haven't got there yet, and I'm not sure we are getting there yet, and I'm trying to be. I'm sitting as the chair. Possibly if I was sitting somewhere else, I might not be. But I would really like to make that plea that this has to be done. It's not a question of, you know, we will hope to see it. We have to see it. You know, we have to see those smart recovery plans that actually deliver those savings targets that we've been asking for. It's not optional. It's not we'll hope to bring it back. We just have to get it done, and it has to be delivered. So that is my request to everybody who is sitting there having to write these. Is I appreciate that it is difficult to find savings, and that is why we have to start doing things differently. And I hope going forward we will see these come in a better way. Because I mean, my idea of a recovery plan is that it is a plan and see the progress. And I understand that this is a live document and that it is not the final thing. If it was, I don't think I would be approving it as it was at the moment. So I look forward to seeing that. And just I do have a quick question. Will we see the medium-term financial plan at the December meeting, Carl?
Yeah, just going answering the first point. You're speaking about doing things differently. So I think the PMO office is certainly an attempt to do things differently. And as I said before, I think ultimately what we want is in each of that directions in the project reference table, we've got a PMO reference number. So that links to detailed project plans, which will be the smart plans. And also the PMO will be able to produce a dashboard showing where projects are at. And that can be used for various reports. So that's where we hope to go with this PMO. And as far as the medium-term financial plan, I'm still waiting on the medium-term financial plan to my funding partners before I can do the IJB one. So I'm led to believe the council's one is maybe even, was that discussed today?
No, it's come into December's meeting. Sorry, Carl, we've lost your sound there. No.
Hello? Hello?
I can hear you faintly.
I will type it into the message box.
Okay, I can hear you now. So, does it have to come to the council before it can come to the IJB? Is that?
No, I need to see the council's medium-term financial plan so I know how much money's being factored in to pass to the IJB. So it's not going to go up to the IJB in December.
Okay, I thought that must be the case because it wasn't on the business planner. It's just, it says in here that so it's hoping to be finalised in December. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, no, that's okay. Joe, did you have your hand up?
It's okay. I was just going to say what Carl did manage to say in the end, that we're reliant on the partners' medium-term financial plans.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the challenges that have come with this year, and financial planning has not been as straightforward for budget setting, so I do appreciate all those difficulties. Did you want to come back in at all, Carl?
Thanks, no.
No. John, did you want to come in with your hand?
Yeah, thank you very much, Emma. I'm not restricted by sitting in the chair. That comes with its advantages, and perhaps I can be kind but a little bit less diplomatic than you are perhaps constrained by. It's interesting that we're calling this a recovery plan. We're saying that it's about not recruiting, assuming a post won't be filled, a delay in restructure, delay in start of clinics, and one-off additional payment. In my personal opinion, that's not a recovery plan, that's firefighting. And that really kind of goes in line with just what you were alluding to earlier on, Emma. We'll look forward to the report from Carol and Brian in due course.
Thank you. Did you want to come back in, Carol? I'm not sure if that was a question or just a comment. I see Jo has her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to say that these aren't, I suppose I wouldn't have used the term firefighting against these saving lines. These have been carefully considered. We've tried to move away from the days when huge pressure was put on our teams to make savings that meant that they weren't then able to deliver the services that they should be delivering. So in terms of the physiotherapist, for example, the reason that post is not being recruited to is because the investment in a physiotherapist in the Loughwick Health Centre is meaning that people are being seen so much more quickly that there is now no longer the demand on the existing physiotherapy service. So that post is being held while we make sure that that continues, that level of service continues, and then that post will no longer be needed in the future. And it's similar arguments for the other areas there as well. So I think it's just to say that this isn't necessarily firefighting, it's actually being quite carefully considered.
Thank you for that, Jo. And I think maybe if we'd had more of that detail in that recovery plan, that might have helped members just feel a little bit more reassured that it was that, yeah, that might have helped, I think. Carl, did you want to come in? Sorry, I know you've had your hand up.
No, sorry, it's just a legacy hand.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, oh, Christine.
Hello, Chair. Thank you for letting me in. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Thank you. It's just with regard to discussing the medium-term financial plan. And I suppose I just want to sound a note of caution, which is that I understand that Carl is anxious to see the Council's medium-term financial plan and NHS medium-term financial plan and so on. However, I think we have to realise that the world we live in at the moment means that even with that information, it's unlikely to give the clear amounts of funding that we might expect because we're so reliant on unknowns ourselves. We are all relying on uncertainty, if I can put it that way. So I think there's a piece of work that we would need to do through the local partnership finance team, which I to discuss how we try collectively across the three organisations, financial officers and senior managers, just how we go forward from this so that we can present medium-term financial plans, but with the caveat that the future is so uncertain, immediate resource sources, if I can put it that way, are uncertain. So in terms of what might come from Scottish Government, what might come in national policy objectives, what might happen with COVID, which you heard earlier in terms of, yes, a lot of wise words, but then we're looking at national organisations with huge debt. So everything financially is so very uncertain. So I think local partnership finance team has a piece of work to do, but I think there's something about a medium-term financial plan being needed to reflect an uncertain environment and context, but be the best that it can be with such information as we have. Whereas, sorry to keep repeating myself, recognising that that information is scant not very far into the future at the moment and likely to be late from everybody else. So if we're talking about Scottish Government only sorting out what they're going to be doing in February, March, then there's something about the longer term plans, trying to do the best we can and then refine it as more detail and information becomes available. So I hope that's helpful. And Carl, I know you're on the call. We will try and get a local partnership finance team meeting soonest, I think, to discuss these issues because they are certainly very challenging times. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Christine. And Carl, did you want to come in?
I think I just want to keep the same sort of key themes and format as the SIC medium-term financial plan. So that's why I'm not trying to steam ahead and develop something earlier. But yeah, I want to give us exact answers, but it will provide a loose framework to build our plans around.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that all makes perfect sense. Thank you. No further comments or questions, anybody? Oh, Robbie, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to follow on with from what Christine said, that I think Carol's in an extremely difficult position, that budgeting, as has been previously said, it's all about the best information that's available at the time. If the information is not good, it's extremely difficult to do budgeting, recovery plans, or whatever's involved. So I would suggest that Carol has to make the best of the information that's available, and I look forward to anything that he's able to produce for future meetings.
Thank you, Robbie. Okay, members, so we've been asked to note the management accounts for the period to the 30th of September and approve the recovery plan as at the 30th of September. Are we happy to do that? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not seeing anybody otherwise minded. Okay. So are we happy to move on to agenda item 4, which is Shetland Islands with Small Populations Locality Plan? I'm not sure who's presenting on that. Is it Elizabeth Robinson? Yes.
Hello, yes it is, sorry. So thank you very much for allowing me to present this report, which I'm doing on behalf of Emma Perring, the Policy Manager at Community Planning and Development. And I need to say thank you to her and her team for leading on this piece of work. This is work that has developed partly in response to the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015, which places a statutory duty on community planning partners to think very carefully about localities within their areas of responsibility. And so locality plans need to cover electoral wards or areas with no more than 30,000 people. Obviously, Shetland fits within that, but it was quite important to understand communities within the whole of Shetland rather than looking at Shetland as a whole. So there's been a significant piece of work under the auspices of the Shetland Partnership to work with the inhabitants of the smaller island populations in Shetland to understand what their needs are, to understand what their ambitions are, to understand what the barriers are that mean that people can't necessarily meet those ambitions. So the islands that are covered by this plan are Fair Isle, Fetla, Fuller, Papastour and Skerries. And this plan, which has been developed in partnership, covers communication between agencies and communities and how we make that clearer, more considerate and effective, how we develop trusting relationships and can therefore work together to sort out any challenges. Issues around operational service delivery, how we can work together to redesign services and use resources and at the same time improve outcomes for island communities. How we can increase the working age population for the smaller islands and consider the implementation and the implications of implementation of national and local policy on smaller island communities and mitigate any negative impacts where that's possible. Obviously, Shetland as a whole, we sometimes feel that UK government or Scottish government policy isn't necessarily appropriate and suitable for us in Shetland. And you can completely understand from that that people from the more remote islands sometimes feel that Shetland-wide policy is not necessarily appropriate for them. So it's how we can adapt and work together and collectively to make those policies appropriate. I'm aware that this has already been presented to NHS Shetland Board and to Shetland Islands Council, so I won't spend too much more time on it. But if I can answer any questions, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I'll open it up to questions. Oh, Jane, go ahead.
Hello. Yes, we've seen it at the NHS and we've seen it and it has gone before the council. So I suppose the only bit is in 4.4, which is pertinent to the IJB specifically, and that's the contribute by way of directions, such funds, staff and other resources and secure participation of community bodies throughout community planning. So it was just that I'm presuming that when we come to revise next year 2021's directions, that would be at that point that we would consider 4.4.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right, Jane. It's a bit it comes in a funny order, doesn't it? We have to fit all the actions in with directions as they're renewed, I suppose. I think that's right.
Thank you. Brian, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just to add on to that, Jane, if we use the new nursing model that we're scoping at the minute, we've actually had a variety of meetings with some of the island communities, and we have some more to actually get the model that's best suited for each locality to take forward as a project. Then, that would be then realised in directions moving forward within community nursing. So that's a way that would be reflected in directions coming up, is that we've taken the engagement, we've listened and participated, and we've drawn up a plan that's locality specific, and then it's realised in direction. So that's a way to demonstrate maybe how that would come to fruition.
Thank you. That's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any further questions or comments, members? I'm looking about the room. No hands up. So, I don't see anybody else coming off mute. We've been asked to approve the Shetland Islands and Small Populations Locality Plan and agree to incorporate the plan into the IJB strategic planning process, and note that the work is ongoing to develop a mechanism that ensures delivery on the outcomes and priorities and continues to involve the island communities. Are we all happy to do that? I think we'd all agree that that's the right approach to take. So we're all happy to do that. Then that is complete. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and pass on my thanks to Emma Perrin as well. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is redesigning urgent care. And Brian, have you taken us through this one?
I am indeed, Chair. Thank you. This is a project that I'm working in collaboration with the Medical Director, Kirsty Brightwell, and Kathleen Carolan as Director of Nursing and Acute Services. Scottish Government initiated the redesign of urgent care programme, which is initially to be implemented on the 31st of October, but that is now the 1st of December. And that's going to be a soft launch and implementation of the changes. The programme builds on evidence that was accumulated during COVID, and in particular the utility of the COVID assessment centres and the hub kind of process that we had during the pandemic. What we learned was that by good redirect, we increased the number of people contacting NHS Inform on the web, and we had an increased number of NHS 24 contacts. But we also managed to decrease attendance at accident and emergency and decrease acute admissions. So I think there was a feeling, how do we build on this and implement change right across the whole system? So there's a new model of urgent care that's come to fruition, and what it is to try and stop footfall in accident and emergencies by those who are feeling that their first port of call with their urgent care needs would be just to turn up at accident emergency. It's estimated that 220,000 people across Scotland can be redirected from just turning up at accident emergency and reallocated into a more appropriate and safer care pathway rather than attend accident emergency departments. So the proposed model is access to urgent care via a single point of access, which will be NHS 24 111. And that will be for anybody wanting to access urgent care 24/7. There's no change to the emergency pathway, so anybody who has an emergency condition, they can still dial 999 and get access to the care that they need via that pathway. Health boards will establish what's called a flow navigation hub, which will receive the referrals from NHS 24. And the Flow Navigation Hub will offer rapid access to a senior clinical decision maker who will undertake triage and place the patient into the most appropriate clinical pathway for that locality. So in Shetland, the Flow Navigation Hub will be facilitated in collaboration with NHS Highland. They already provide a lot of our out-of-hours support via the Highland Hub. So in conjunction with the Highland Hub, NHS Highland are also establishing a flow navigation hub, which will support all the island boards. The development of the urgent care pathways has also redevelopment of the urgent care pathways has also been reconfigured in Shetland specifically to focus on same-day emergency care pathway and a primary care emergency centre. So same-day emergency care, you probably heard Kathleen Carolan talking about it in her directions. It's the provision of same-day care for urgent patients who would otherwise be admitted to hospital. It's going to be sited in the Gilbertbane Hospital in the old day surgery unit, which is currently being used as a standby respiratory care unit as well for COVID patients. So there is that little bit of balance between if we have a rise in COVID cases in the hospital, then we may not be able to provide a same-day emergency centre at the minute. But there have been various plans pulled together to reconfigure that either way to a respiratory care unit or same-day emergency care unit. We reviewed our flow in accident emergency, and between the first 4 months of this calendar year, 8% of patients presenting the accident emergency breached the 4-hour waiting target. And assessment of that assumed that the majority of these patients were actually suitable for same-day emergency care. And the sort of hypothesis was, would that have decreased the breach numbers? So we'll be undergoing a test of change at the minute, which has been led by Dr. James Hayton, our consultant in emergency medicine. And during that change period, where we've had about 6 weeks of same-day emergency care, only one patient has waited more than 4 hours and breached, and that's a 0.35%, so quite a considerable change. But just a caveat, there will be some small number variation in there that we just need to be cognizant of. The primary care emergency centre provides out-of-hours primary care services when GP services are closed and the patients are too ill to wait for the next day for the GP surgeries to open. So this is currently sited in accident emergency in Gilbertbane, and that has allowed some good multidisciplinary team working with having the primary care and secondary care teams in the same locus. Initially, the PCEC was to run in the evenings and over the weekends. but its numbers have dictated that there's no need for it during the weekday in the evening, so it just runs from about 12 in the afternoon to 9 o'clock at night, Saturday and Sunday. It provides that primary care, urgent care access. So we have the two pathways now established as tests of change in Shetland, and that the third edition will be the flow navigation hub provided by NHS Highland. It will be implemented on the 1st of December, and the final piece in the jigsaw is linking up that flow navigation hub with our urgent care pathways. We're going to run this model over Christmas. We're going to link in with the national messaging regarding urgent care, which will happen after Christmas. So they've given us about 6 weeks to see how we implement it in a soft approach, so we're not overwhelmed with patient contacts or patient throughput during a busy time. We're also going to review the evidence and the data that we're collecting about contacts through both pathways and the flow of information and patients from contacting NHS 24 through to getting into the most appropriate pathway, but also going to review that with the financial envelope that we have to provide this service and look at how we sustain it. And then finally, we're also going to scope the possibility of widening the pathways to include access to urgent care via CPNs, physio, pharmacy and OT. So that's just a little synopsis of what the tests of change are and the next steps in the direction of travel for those tests. Chair, happy to take any comments or questions that people may have.
Thanks very much for that, Brian. Before I open it up to questions, just a really quick question from me. I suppose it's all good and well you going into quite a detailed explanation there. There's a lot of information in what we've been given. How do we get this messaging out to the public? How do we explain it in a manner to them that is straightforward and says, this is what you need to do now? Because I think sometimes we maybe forget that not everybody understands what all these things mean.
No, absolutely, a really good point. The national programme team have pulled in national corporate communication teams to look at the messaging, because the messaging is really, I think, quite tricky. The messaging is, if you've got a 999 emergency, dial 999. But if you're urgent care, then you need to dial 111. But if you just need to see your own GP and that's what you were planning to do, then you contact your own GP. So the messaging is quite difficult, but they've trialled it out. They have a pilot site that is being used in Ayrshire and Arran, where they've tried some social media and local media kind of interventions to get that message across. And we will do that when it comes to the 1st of December. We will do a little bit of local messaging around that. However, we will link completely in with the national messaging when it happens in January and really push forward. Hopefully by then we'll have tested all the pathways and we'll be able to put a more forceful kind of message out there that this is what needs to be done, and try and keep it as clear, concise and simple as possible.
Thank you for that. Okay, Jim.
Are we going to have something for the islands like Unst? You know what I mean? Because this doesn't apply to the likes of me, right? You know, there's no mention that this is just said that we've created this, but it's basically, you know, Shetland mainland that this is aimed at. Primarily, you know what I mean? I know that if you end up in an ambulance from Unst, you would then join into the system. But there's no mention about what's going to happen for islands.
Thanks for the question, Jim. Very right. I should have mentioned that the island communities will be linking in and have that opportunity to dial 111, but the outcome will be probably via their local GP who's on island, and that's why we sustain that service going forward, because we understand the nuances of that urgent care. But we would hope that we might sweep some people up in you're safe enough to wait till the next morning and access your GP in a normal way, or it may be, a redirect via NHS Inform. So it will be an output will be different for the islands that have got doctors on them compared to islands, the mainland Shetland as well. So there'll just be slightly different pathways and outputs. But the ethos is still the same, that we're trying to get the patients into the most appropriate pathway.
Thank you for that, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Any further questions, members? No, I'm not seeing any hands up. Any comments of anybody? No. I'd be keen to, if possible, if we could maybe be cited on the communications and just what it's going to look like. You can maybe share that with members just so that they have an understanding of what the messaging is going to be, so that when it does come out, if people are asking questions, what does this mean, then all IJB members are clear about the process. I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely, Chair. It's a great idea, so thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else coming off mute or with a hand up. So we've been asked to note the implementation of the redesign of urgent care in Shetland as directed by the Scottish Government policy, and at 1.2 would have been asked to approve the direction of travel of the project, the next steps and proposed outcomes in alignment with the strategic commissioning plan. Are we all happy to do that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not seeing anybody say otherwise, so that's that. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the IJB business programme and IJB action tracker, and that's Brian again.
Thank you, Chair. So this is just the IJB business programme that's come around. I think the starting point for me is just to highlight the amount of business that we still have outstanding. We have things like the update on the scheme of integration review that needs to come to December's meeting, and update on review of strategic plan. We also have a remobilisation plan update added to the business or IJB business. So I'm just aware that on the 10th of December, it's a 2-hour meeting that's in my diary at the minute, and I wonder if there's discussion and merit in maybe seeing whether we can extend that meeting or make it longer to get through the business. So we're going into the festive period near enough with everything that IJB needs to be cited on done, and then the follow-up actions can be taken forward in January and February's meeting. So it was really just to see how the board felt about that as a suggestion for me to go away and have a look at that.
I have it in my diary for 3 hours, but I don't know what's on. I don't know if there's anything conflicting in the afternoon. I don't have anything. Liesl?
The meeting is from 10 o'clock until 1 o'clock in the diary. There's nothing in the diary at the moment for the afternoon, so it has the potential to reconvene at 2 if required.
I think that's really helpful. I think it's better if we don't have restrictions on time, because like Brian said, there is a lot of business on the 10th of December, and I would much prefer to be able to get through all that business rather than the potential of having to reconvene and the inconvenience that causes everybody with busy diaries. So I would be happy to just carry on until we were finished, if that's possible.
That's great. I'll take that away and speak to the corporate team just to have a look, and Liesl and Alan, just see where we are with that. Holding that 2 o'clock spot for overflow if it needs to be, if you're happy with that.
Natasha, did you want to come in on that point?
Just a very brief point about the business plan. We don't seem to have the winter plan there for coming to the December meeting. I'm presuming that we'll need to see that.
The winter plan is still very much in building, so I'm happy to bring an update just on that. But we felt that the papers were due in this week, and we're not at that stage where we actually have a winter plan per se. But I'm happy to bring an update of just where we are and what we've been planning, just to provide some insight into that. A lot of the winter planning this year was caught in the sort of COVID pandemic planning and the recovery planning around that as well. So really, a lot of the winter planning was for the 4-day weekend that will be happening at the festive period. Just everybody sort of cognizant that 4 days to sustain kind of services and access to services is a little bit different this year. So that's what a lot of the main focus of the winter planning was this year, rather than it being the winter plan that normally comes to fruition, which looks at flu vaccinations and everything along those lines as well. They've all been taken up via the pandemic planning and sort of winter planning in the broader sense with respect to COVID.
You want to come back in, Natasha? I'm not seeing if Natasha does want to come back in or not. So does that, sorry, just to understand, winter plan was one of my questions too. So we don't have a winter plan this year, is that what you're saying?
We have a winter plan and it's just coming to fruition. A lot of it is around how we're sustaining services those four days. I wonder if a brief would be more helpful that I could provide for members.
Elizabeth, do you want to come in?
Hello, it was just to say that, just to clarify, it is just about covering the 4 days at Christmas and New Year this year, so there isn't the level of complexity and detail that we would normally want to see. So I think a briefing might be appropriate.
Okay, that's fine. Jane, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think use of briefings can be really supportive in the business programme as well as we move forward, and also having the name of who's presenting the paper, you know, as early as possible. So if there's any questions that are very specific to our understanding, we can ask those, but obviously we then don't want to hinder the discussion at the actual board. But sometimes it's just, you know, my own personal understanding, so I can, if I've got time, I can request that clarification directly. So that's another part of managing the time of the actual meeting, might be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Jane, and I think that's something that everybody is welcome to do at any point. I think Natasha has just coming back in, so I might just wait and see. Natasha, did you want to come back in at all on that point? I'm not sure how much of that you missed.
I'm sorry, I've literally just come back in, so I've missed quite a lot of it. I only got to the point where Brian said that that the winter plan wasn't yet ready, and that was about it. Sorry.
That's okay. Brian, do you want to give it a quick update?
Absolutely, Chair. Yeah, it was just saying, Tasha, the winter plan this year is specifically about the 4-day shutdown over Christmas and New Year. A lot of the other winter planning has been swept up in kind of pandemic planning and the broader sense of management of pandemic through winter this year. So what my suggestion was to provide a briefing for members just on what will be happening over that period. A little bit about Emma's point about when we move to the urgent care, if members are aware of what that change is, and you know, I think that will be of benefit in case they get any questions. So maybe a briefing would be a better way of just laying down what's happening over those 4 days periods.
Okay, Natasha.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any further questions or comments? I noticed there's quite a few items still planned business to be scheduled, so we would need to look at that, so to manage agendas, I suppose, going forward and next year, so that we're not ending up with so many in one.
I think so, and there's quite a bit about the workforce, and we're just at the stage of just starting that workforce planning work. So I thought about moving that into next year, and just seeing where we are with that kind of project of pulling together workforce planning in parallel with the directions which will be starting to be planned at that stage as well. And the communication strategy, I'm happy to move that to February and bring something back then. And I'm just looking at, yes, there was a point came up on one of the other meetings we were at, myself and the vice chair, about the code of conduct and whether we should review that and just reinvigorate that and just bring that and refresh that. It was via a different meeting, but the question was asked, did the IJB have its own code of conduct for members, bearing in mind it's its own separate entity and identity and how that would feel. And I felt that might be something that'd be worth just bringing back, maybe just as a quick agenda item, just to just to look at it and just reinforce it and refresh it if it's needed.
I'm just going to let Jan in there. Jan, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. I'm the board's standards officer, given that you are a devolved body, and so you're not subject to the councillor's code of conduct. But the councillor's code of conduct, the model code that devolved bodies approve. So you do have your own approved code of conduct at the moment, and it dates from the beginning or close to the beginning of the integration board. So 4 years on, it possibly is subject to review, not least of all because the councillor's code has been reviewed twice since. So that really, in a way, this recommendation is an opportune one. But I think that you should have me as your reporting officer conducting that review and proposing a new code to you. What I would say is that I don't know if any of the anoraks among you, so I apologise, put my hand up, I am one, have been following it, but the councillor's code at the moment is in front of the Scottish Parliament in parliamentary session for their approval, and it has a whole new section devoted to the conduct of, in that respect, it's councillors. But as I say, because your template code is very much based on the councillor code of conduct, I think that we should wait and see what the Parliament does in terms of approving the councillor's code, and then review yours on the back of that, because to me that would be timely. I think if you do anything ahead of that, you might just find yourself having to review it again in only a matter of months. So yeah, I'd undertake to do that if that's okay with your Chief Officer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Jan. John, did you have your hand up?
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, I did have my hand up, but Jan's basically said exactly what I was going to say, so that's fantastic. And I think if there is going to be a review of the code of conduct, it has to be done in a timely manner to tie in with things at a national level, and I certainly think it should be managed by the monitoring officer, which is Mr. Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, was there anything else that you wanted to highlight, Brian?
Just to highlight, I've updated the action tracker, changed the status of some of the action points on that. Some of the other ones will be swept up. I think we've got some seminars in the diary, and some of the action points on the action tracker are alluding to those seminars. And take away the one about the finance that we've already discussed today as well, and get something in the seminar kind of list for that as well.
Okay, Jane.
Thank you. No, it's just to the conversation we had earlier about the transitions. I don't know whether that should go on the action tracker or onto the business programme, just that we have pulled together and look at where that's going. But the other thing as well is that the 10th of December for an update of the scheme of integration review. I think we also need to be mindful that the CCPGC, which is a governance committee of the IJB, is still stepped down. So I think we do need some form of action that shows where that current assurance is provided for the IJB. And I know there's a meeting after the 10th about that, so it might just be that we need to balance that, because that obviously was stepped down and just been postponed, but that's the situation we are in just now. The CCPGC is still stepped down.
Thank you, Jane. Do you want to come back in at all, Brian? Are you?
No, it's something I think we need to discuss at one of our seminars, just what the proposals are and how we will undertake that kind of governance role, or that governance role is undertaken on behalf of the IJB. So it is certainly something that's being developed that I think we will need to have a discussion about at a seminar in the future, just to cover off those gaps and provide that reassurance, Jane. So I think thank you for raising that.
Okay, do we have any further comments or questions, members? Are we satisfied that we've approved the business plan for the financial year to 31st of March 2021 and that we've reviewed that action tracker? We all happy? Jane?
Sorry. So where's the transitions sitting? Is it in the action tracker or in the business programme? Sorry.
Sorry, Chair. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I'll put it in for the March meeting, and then I'll present the paper. We'll have had enough time to maybe get that working group together and have a way forward. And again, it will link in round about that time of directions as well, if you're happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely happy. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Peter?
If the transitions working group revise our local protocol and procedures, presumably they'll then need to take that to various groups for approval. So it's just to, obviously for Brian's sake, to make him aware that that's going to be part of the role of the transitions working group, because I think the last revision was 2014.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you. Okay, any further comments or questions? No, that's good. Are we all happy to close the meeting? Yep. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much everybody for your attendance today and your questions and comments, and we will see you all in December.
Well done, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.